What's up guys, it's Pio here, and today I'll be showing you different options for holding Dust 2 A site. These work best if you have 1 to 2 friends to coordinate these CT plays and setups. So with that out of the way, let's get right into the video. Starting with your 2-1-2 setup. So when your team is running a 2-1-2 setup, the A players should generally play 2 towards long early. In your typical matchmaking games, it's not uncommon to see people go 1A long and 1A short. This is not the ideal setup, and here's why. One player in long isn't enough to contest a long rush with flashes and smokes coming in. Once your long player dies, you lose complete long control and your catwalk player is isolated from A. The same goes for vice versa. Suppose that these default towards short A. The CT player on short is isolated and overwhelmed. Therefore, when playing a site with 2 players, you need a buddy system to play off each other. So instead of 1 long and short each, you can have 2 players on A long. The best spawn plays anti-flash, then pre-mollies long doors on the run to pit. The first spawn shouldn't commit to a fight on long corner, but instead take space by crossing. Even if you get blinded, try to keep moving to pit. The purpose of the second spawn is to support or trade frag you. Also, having control of pit means the T's have to split their attention instead of just focusing on long corner. The second spawn can molly the blue container, flash off the wall, and fight alongside the pit player. With these 2 mollies down, you funnel the T's out of position. They either have to stay behind long doors or get funneled out by the mollies. Though if the T's rarely aggress long or contest in blue bin, you don't always have to dump 2 of your mollies straight away. The first can just molly long doors, while the second spawn holds onto his molly for later use. You can also add variations to your long hold. For instance, you can do so by having the first spawn molly blue bin, while the second spawn smokes long doors and counter flashes. Using this variation, the terrorists cannot be in blue bin and are also denied vision in long doors, so they have to be committed out long and are highly vulnerable to the long counter flash. Another variation would be to use this long support smoke from CT. For 64 tick, you aim like shown, then run and jump throw. It pops in front of long corner, allowing you to cross more safely into pit. You can also use this smoke to creep into blue bin. If the T's like to smoke long corner during their long takes, you can bounce a smoke from the post like this. It creates a smoke wall and gives your team more freedom in pit and long. So those are just some of the variations to hold long A. Feel free to test them out in-game to counter your opponent's common tendencies. Let's now move on to the approach after getting long control. From here, your team has multiple options that would depend on the situation. So your first option would be to have your pit player anchor long, while the second spawn rotates to spot the catwalk push. In addition, this player spotting catwalk shouldn't commit to engagements and play to fall back to long instead. Just be aware that a T can lurk out long, so your pit player needs to be mindful of this timing. Alternatively, you can play full retake A by having 2 players stay in long. By going this route, you establish a firm grasp on long while entrusting mid and B to your 3 other teammates. 1 mid and 2 B should be able to hold against a B split. If the T's execute on short A, you'll have CT spawn and long as avenues to retake from. At the same time, if the T's push out of long or split A, your position is a good counter. From here, you can establish setups like 1 blue and 1 pit. Another bait setup you can run would be 1 pit and 1 behind long doors. If you want an off angle to catch the A long lurk, you can also boost on top of blue like this. Another play to consider would be pushing through the long doors. When should you be doing this? Well, an excellent time to aggress long for information would be when the T's are showing presence in the lower mid or mid to B area. With good timing, you can catch a straggler in middle or at the very least, gain valuable information for your team. But as you push long doors, you still have to be on the lookout for the lurker. Expect him to be behind car, outside the doors, or this box. Let's now move on to a 3A setup. Nowadays, it's not rare to see the 3A, 1 mid, and 1 B setup over the 2-on-2. In a 3A setup, the same protocols apply when taking long A. First spawn mollies and crosses to pit, while the second spawn supports. The key difference is that an extra player can toss support utility while the first and second spawn fight for long A. After helping with long control, the third A player can now focus on watching catwalk, and this player would usually have an op. On top of that, the second spawn can help hold short or even mid to B. Aside from long control, another approach to holding A would be to play for short control instead. Playing for short is viable if your team has lost long on multiple instances. This setup is also ideal if the T's are heavy towards A short and you want to challenge. From here, you can have smart setups like one playing anti-flash by the short stairs and one playing from around brick. In other instances, you can add aggression to your short hold by having your second player hold the flash from elbow. Your team can use this re-aggress tactic to get favorable fights or just to gain info on short A. Another play you can integrate into the short A hold would be this op boost pick. If you're starting 3A, you can boost 2 players fast onto A short. You can 2-man boost with the op to peek lower tunnels when you reach this corner. As for the player boosting, just have your gun out and prepare counter grenades if the T's run up to short. If your team is running a 2-on-2, you can still go for a short peek by having your second player boost you instead. You won't have the tower to peek lower, but instead you can stay close to this wall. Just be aware that you can get flashed, so try to play anti-flash every now and then. Also, if you go for this type of play, you have to tell your mid player to watch the top mid push for you. Granted that he covers this, you can focus on lower tunnels. Another option when doing 3A would be to have an opper spot long from barrels while 2 players take short control. As the opper, you can't overcommit on long. You take that first shot and you reposition immediately. As the T's smoke cross and push up, the opper can one-way smoke like this by the baskets. This smoke gives you 2 angles to peek ramp while being difficult to spot. You also don't have to worry about short because your 2 teammates took short control. However, experienced players would recognize this one way and spam the edges. Okay, moving on. What to do after having a short? If the T's are putting pressure on long, a reactive play can be to push short A further and try to fight the mid guy. Just be careful of the lower tunnels lurk. If the T's are out mid to B, you can even go for a flank if you have a rifle. So far, I've gone over the A long and short hold. Let's not talk about the site defense against short executes or A splits. So if you are 3A and established long control, you leave the pit player to anchor and you'll free up 2 A players to hold against a short exec. Here are just some options when it comes to defending A site. So the main spots to defend A site would be ramp, goose, and the site itself. One site setup would be goose and ramp. You'll have the ramp player jiggle and spot for contact. While this is happening, the goose player fully hides until he takes contact from site. As the ramp player, you can throw counter grenades and even place a defensive smoke like this. This defensive smoke disrupts the A exec and forces the T's into unfavorable fights. With the smoke up, you can even pivot around the site and also peek towards this one way. By playing ramp, you also have to be aware that a spawn trap could happen. You have to trust that your goose player will have your site push while you focus on CT when this happens. If you don't have this defensive smoke, another play you can set up would be having your goose player hold the flash while the ramp player spots short. Once the T's cross onto elbow right here, the goose player can throw the flash then peek with the ramp player. To add, the pit anchor player can throw support flashes over ramp like this, which blinds the T's scaling up to A side. He can go for this support play, assuming that long is clear and there aren't any lurkers. Another setup your team can play would be site and car. This works best if you have an opper on A. So you'll have the op post up from around the car position onto short. This is a strong spot because the op has many opportunities to find picks and fall back immediately. While the T's are dealing with the op, the site player can use this timing to peek from the site. Your team isn't limited to these 2 specific setups. Feel free to mix up the spots to see what works for you and your friends. Just keep in mind that good setups are ones where you can fight together with a crossfire or play off each other through a bait setup. So that wraps up the definitive guide to holding A on Dust2 CT side. Thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoyed and learned from the video. Also, Feel free to send this to your friends so you can test out these setups in the game. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.